Have you ever been so far from home that a simple smell could bring you to tears? A scent that wraps around you like a hug you didn't even know you needed? For me, living thousands of miles from everything familiar, that smell was my mother's pork adobo. A smell my new friends called weird, right before they fought over the last bite. This is the story of how a simple pot of food, a dish holding the history of my people, became a bridge in a city where I felt like a total island. It's a story about loneliness, identity, and the undeniable power of a home-cooked meal. The silence in my apartment was a different kind of quiet. Back home in Manila, silence was never actually silent. It was always full of something. The distant crow of a neighbor's rooster, the rumble of a passing jeepney, the cheerful chaos of a dozen cousins under one roof. Here, in this clean, minimalist apartment in a city I'd only seen in movies, the silence was heavy, empty. It was the sound of being completely alone. I'd been here for 6 months, a tiny pin on a huge map, trying to build a new life. I had a new job, a new routine, and even a couple of new friends, Chloe and Ben. They were kind and funny, and they were trying to get me, but there was a gap, a cultural chasm that felt a mile wide, and I had no idea how to build a bridge across it. The loneliness was this constant, dull ache, just humming beneath the surface. And tonight, it was louder than ever. It was a Friday night, the kind of night that, back home, would have been buzzing with the promise of a family dinner, laughter bouncing off the walls. Here, it was just me and my 4 white walls. I scrolled through my phone, a gallery of smiling faces, and food I could almost taste. There was my aunt's birthday, with a whole roasted lechon gleaming on the table. A Sunday lunch with my cousins, a mountain of garlic rice surrounded by bowls of sinigang and kare-kare. And then I saw it. A picture my mom sent last week. A close-up of a clay pot, dark and glossy, filled with her pork adobo. The homesickness hit me like a wave. It wasn't just a craving. It was a deep, desperate need for a taste of home. That's when I decided. I couldn't stand the silence anymore. I had to fill this sterile apartment with the one smell that meant safety, family, and love. I was going to cook my mother's adobo. I sent a quick text to Chloe and Ben. Spontaneous dinner at my place tonight? I'm making a traditional Filipino dish. Ben's reply was instant. Awesome! We'll bring dessert. Chloe's was a little more hesitant. Ooh, exciting. What is it? Is it spicy? I smiled. Chloe was a sweetheart, but her palate was cautious. It's called pork adobo, I typed back. It's savory and tangy. You'll love it. At least, I hoped they would. An hour later, they arrived right as I was browning the pork. The second I opened the door, a wave of the unfamiliar aroma hit them. I saw it on Chloe's face first, a tiny wrinkle of her nose. Hey, she said, forcing a bright smile. Wow, that's a strong smell. What is that? It's the marinade, I explained, my heart sinking a little. It's soy sauce and vinegar. Vinegar? Ben asked, stepping inside. He was trying to be polite, but I could see the question in his eyes. You cook with vinegar? I just nodded, waving them in. It's a huge part of our cuisine. It was a way to preserve food before we had refrigerators. It keeps the meat tender and safe to eat. Huh, was all Chloe said, placing a box of cupcakes on my counter, as far from the sizzling pan as she could get. They'd called my food weird without even saying the word. That chasm between us suddenly felt wider than ever. I took a deep breath, the steam from the pan filling my lungs. No, I told myself, this smell isn't weird. This smell is home. And tonight, I was going to share it. I turned back to the stove, letting the familiar ritual of cooking calm my nerves. This wasn't just a recipe, it was a ceremony. Every single ingredient had a story, a memory attached. First, the pork belly. I'd found a decent cut at a butcher a few towns over. As I laid the pieces in the hot oil, the sizzle was a familiar song. I remembered being a little girl, standing on a stool, watching my mother do the exact same thing. "Get a good sear on it, anak," she would say. "That's where the flavor starts. You're browning it for a deeper taste, not just for color. Be patient." I let the pork sit, resisting the urge to move it, until a deep golden brown crust formed. The foundation. Next up, the garlic. And not just a clove or two. I took a whole head, smashing each clove with the flat of my knife, the way my Lola taught my mom, and my mom taught me. The sharp, pungent aroma filled the air, mingling with the rich scent of the pork. My mom always said, "Garlic is the soul of our dishes. It wakes everything up." I tossed the smashed cloves into the pot, and the kitchen was instantly perfumed. Ben sneezed from the living room. "Whoa, that's a lot of garlic," he called out. I just smiled. He had no idea. Then, the two main actors, soy sauce and vinegar. This is the heart of adobo. I poured in the dark, salty soy sauce, a culinary gift from Chinese traders who came to our shores centuries ago. Then came the vinegar. Not the harsh white vinegar they probably used for cleaning, but a gentle cane vinegar I'd found at an Asian market. "The vinegar is our history, Maya," my mom once told me. Long before the Spanish came, our ancestors used vinegar and salt to keep food from spoiling in the heat. It's the taste of ingenuity. The Spanish would later give the dish its name, adobo, from their word for marinade. But the soul of it? That was always ours. As I poured the vinegar in, the sharp, acidic scent rose up, cutting through the richness. This was the smell that made Chloe wrinkle her nose. It was sharp, yes. Unfamiliar, for sure. But to me, it was the smell of resilience. My mother always said not to stir the pot right after adding the vinegar. "Let the angry smell cook off," she'd say. "Let it mellow out before you disturb it." So I let it be. I tucked in a few dried bay leaves and a generous spoonful of whole black peppercorns. My dad always loved the little jolt of heat when he'd bite into one. Every family has their own adobo. Some add coconut milk for a creamy finish. Others use turmeric for a brilliant yellow color. But this version, this simple balance of soy, vinegar, garlic, and pepper, this was my family's. This was my mother's. This was mine. I lowered the heat, put the lid on the pot, and let it simmer. All there was to do was wait. Over the next hour, the smell in the apartment began to transform. The sharpness of the vinegar softened, melting into the saltiness of the soy sauce. The garlic turned sweet and jammy. The pork slowly surrendered, becoming unbelievably tender. The aroma that was once strong and weird deepened into something rich and complex. It was the smell of a promise. I saw Ben take a deep, appreciative sniff from the couch. Even Chloe looked less wary. The aroma was building the bridge I couldn't build with words. The silence in the apartment wasn't empty anymore. It was full of anticipation. After what felt like forever, it was ready. I lifted the lid, and a glorious cloud of steam filled the kitchen with the scent of home. The pork was a deep mahogany, glistening in a dark, thick sauce. The fat had rendered beautifully, making everything glossy. It was perfect. I carefully spooned the adobo into a serving bowl. Then came the most crucial part. a mountain of fluffy, steaming white rice on each plate. In Filipino culture, rice isn't a side dish, it's the canvas. The adobo sauce is the paint. I generously ladled the dark, savory sauce over the rice, watching it seep into every grain. I brought the food to the table. Chloe and Ben just stared. The skepticism was gone, replaced by pure curiosity. "So," Ben began, picking up his fork, "how do we do this?" "Just make sure you get a lot of rice," I smiled, "and don't be shy with the sauce." Ben took the first bite, a piece of pork and some sauce-soaked rice. He chewed slowly, his eyes closed. There was a pause that felt longer than the whole hour of cooking. I held my breath. His eyes shot open. "Whoa," he breathed out. He looked at me, then at his plate, then back at me, a look of pure shock on his face. "Maya, what is this? This is incredible." It was a flavor profile he'd never experienced, and his palate was doing fireworks. Chloe watched him, a nervous smile on her face. Encouraged, she took a much smaller, tentative bite. She chewed, her brow furrowed. I braced myself, and then the furrow smoothed. Her eyes widened. A slow smile spread across her face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's sour, but it's salty, but it's savory. All at once. And the pork just melts." That was it. The bridge was built. The floodgates were open. What followed was a blur of happy eating. The polite chatter disappeared, replaced by appreciative murmurs. "This sauce is insane," Ben said through a full mouth, already spooning more onto his plate. "I could drink this stuff." Chloe, my cautious Chloe, was on her third helping. "I can't believe I was worried about the smell," she said, shaking her head. "It smells amazing now. It smells like this taste." They started getting into it. I showed them how my dad makes a little dipping sauce, a sausawan of more vinegar with crushed raw garlic to cut the richness. Ben dove right in. Chloe discovered the magic of mashing a soft, jammy clove of cooked garlic into her rice. Soon, only one piece of pork was left. Ben's fork and Chloe's fork hovered over the bowl at the exact same time. They looked at each other. "I saw it first," Ben said, his eyes narrowed playfully. "No way," Chloe shot back, her fork poised. "You've had more than me. I was skeptical. I deserve it as a prize for my personal growth." They began a hilarious, slow-motion fork duel, laughing as they vied for the last glorious bite. I just sat back and watched them, a feeling of pure joy washing over me. They were fighting over my mother's adobo, the food they called weird. They weren't just eating my food, they were embracing a piece of my home, a piece of me. The sound of their laughter was the most beautiful thing I'd heard in months. It was louder than the silence. In the end, I did what any good Filipino host would do. I went back to the kitchen, scraped the last bits from the pot, and divided the final piece in two. Truce declared. Peace restored. We leaned back, full and happy, the empty serving bowl sitting between us like a trophy. The pot was scraped clean. The atmosphere in the room had totally changed. My quiet, sterile apartment finally felt warm and lived in. "Maya, you have to write this recipe down for me," Chloe demanded. "I'm serious. I need this again." "Or," Ben chimed in, "you could just make it for us again? What other Filipino food is there? Is it all this good?" I laughed, a real, happy laugh. "There's so much more," I said, and for the first time, I felt an excitement to share, not a pressure to fit in. I told them about the sour broth of sinigang and the rich peanut stew of kare-kare. Their eyes lit up, not with skepticism, but with genuine hunger. The food had done more than fill our stomachs. It had closed the distance between us. The weirdness was now a point of connection. My little piece of home wasn't just mine anymore. By sharing it, I had created a new little piece of home right here with my friends. I wasn't an island anymore. I was part of a tiny new archipelago, brought together by a pot of pork adobo. Looking at the empty pot and my friends' smiling faces, I realized something. Food is a story. Every dish carries the history of a family and the culture of a people. What seems weird is usually just a story you haven't heard yet. My mother's adobo wasn't just pork in a sauce. It was a story of survival, ingenuity, and love, passed down through generations. And by sharing that story, I found out I wasn't so alone after all. Turns out, the best way to bridge a gap is to invite someone over for dinner. That experience taught me that our food is such a powerful part of our identity. It connects us to our roots and to each other. So now, I want to hear from you. What's a dish that tastes like home to you? Is there a food from your culture that others find weird, but you know is wonderful? Share your stories in the comments. I really believe the more stories we share, the smaller the world gets. And of course, if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more. Thank you for being here. And as we say in the Philippines before a meal, kain tayo. Let's eat.